This week, we begin a new book in the Torah, the book of Exodus. And as the story of our redemption from slavery to freedom unfolds, the Torah challenges us to consider God's role in our lives during times of crisis. These sacred stories serve to remind us that human beings, as well as God, are central to the processes that lead to our redemption. And this is an incredibly important message to embrace during this Shabbat that is the beginning of the Martin Luther King weekend, as well as during a week which has been consumed by fires in Los Angeles and a ceasefire unfolding between Israel and Hamas. Let's begin with the fires in Los Angeles. As we have watched the devastating fires consuming the city of Los Angeles, this following passage from the Book of Kings comes to mind. It reads, "Come out," he called, "and stand on the mountain of God." And lo, God passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by God's power. But God was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft, murmuring sound. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his mantle about his face and went and stood at the entrance of a cave. Then a voice addressed him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" This passage reminds us that God's voice speaks within us and to us in our minds and our voices of conscience, that God may not be in the fire or the earthquake or in the storm, but God is in our response to those moments. God is in the hands and the hearts of the firefighters, the first responders, the acts of those who have opened their homes in Los Angeles to those who have lost their homes to the fire. And let us lead this idea of human efforts from fire to ceasefire. The human hand in restitution and repair planted its seeds this week as there is an announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, marking an important step in ending this war and bringing home our hostages. As Jews, we welcome new paths that will hopefully lead to peace. For we may pray to God for peace. We may be called upon God to bring peace. But only through human actions can peace be realized. This weekend, celebrating the life and the actions of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., reminds us of the urgency of such action. This weekend, our nation pays tribute to the memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who found himself immersed in some of the darkest chapters of our nation's history, who, guided by that which he knew was right, being guided by that still small voice within him spoken to us about Elijah, set in motion a series of events that would change our nation and our world for the better. Whether it is in response to natural disaster, or whether it is in response to human-caused disaster, this weekend, our Torah portion and our celebration of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. challenge us to recognize that God may lay out the blueprints for us to follow. God may lay out the foundations for righteousness and peace in the world, but it is up to each of us to act. Shabbat Shalom.